Greetings and welcome to a Motley Monday. Today, Betty White and I, as usual, are in the kitchen and we are dealing with the last of the pepper harvest. All of our bell peppers, sweet peppers, are gone. They've been harvested, but we still had quite a few jalapenos and serranos left, hot peppers, chilies left on our plants. I have the bowl, this thick of a bowl for the serranos, and I have this much jalapenos, maybe twice as many jalapenos, not quite. And I have a combination. I have a few that are like smaller ones that are still green, but for the most part they are red. They were bright red on the bush. And while we do not tear, we're not going to tear out our bushes this year, because we know now that the pepper plants are considered to be perennials, at least here in Southern California. So we're going to be trimming back our plants in the garden, and we're going to be, to keep them for winter and hoping that we will get some chilies next year. We'll have a head start next year. Of course, they don't become ripe until it gets to be nice warmer days. But it takes up everything that we start from seed indoors, takes up a lot of space and takes up a lot of attention, electricity. And if we can just keep the plant, if the plant can just stay in the garden, we have that big of a head start on next year's crop. So while there's a little drawback that we have some in beds that may be taking up room, or we want to plant some other things, we will deal with that in an easier fashion than perhaps doing all the effort of every year starting things out from seed. Most of the plant, like I said, most of them have turned red, and as a matter of fact, some of them have even begun to dry on the plant, waiting for us to harvest them. And there's nothing wrong with that. They can dry on the plant. I pick all the time. As a matter of fact, I have some, here's a couple, like a handful of, these are poblanos that are dried. See how shriveled they are. They're pretty much completely dried, that I will be adding to my stash. But all the time I'm picking serranos, particularly serranos and jalapenos that are not too big, the smaller size, that I just leave in bowls around the house and around the kitchen, and they just eventually just dry up. And when they are completely dry, like this one's completely dry, I will just then throw them in a jar. I think you might have seen me with some of those jars before, and store them that way, okay? And which they can be hydrated later, or they can be used. I put them in things all the time. What am I going to be doing with these peppers today? Well, my tomatoes, my plum tomatoes are, I think we're pretty well harvested those. I'm not sure if we'll get any more. I don't think we'll get any more now. We might be saving some of those tomato plants, some of the better ones at least, till next year, because it's possible here in the wintertime, even we get enough warm weather some years that we just had some tomatoes, a few ripe tomatoes on the vine. They're not as good as they are in the summer, but a nice ripe tomato is better than no tomato at all sometimes. So we'll see about that. But anyway, they're still very much in season here. We're at the end of the season, but it's still partly the season here. So I know I'm able to get some good aromas some good organic aromas from the market. And my husband is picking those up for me right now, because I want to make, one of the things I want to do with some of my peppers, particularly the jalapenos, I want to do like a salsa roja. A red salsa. A salsa roja is what you normally get in I don't know if it's the same where you live, but where we live, like in a typical Mexican restaurant, or like a chain, especially like an El Torito or something like that. It's their table salsa. It's a blended salsa. It's spicy. It's pretty spicy. And they usually make that out of it's a combination of tomato and garlic and onion and serrano pepper, something like a serrano pepper. so I'm going to do that. I'm going to try that, and I'll show you that in a minute how I'm going to do it. I'm also going to make a pepper jelly. I love a pepper jelly, and pepper jelly usually is made with bell peppers, combination bell peppers and jalapenos. So I'm going to, and I have a couple bell peppers in the refrigerator left over from my Thanksgiving shopping that need to be eaten. They're still pretty good, but they need to be eaten. So I'm going to combine some of those with with my jalapenos, and I'm going to use something called, I don't know if you have ever seen this, it's called Pomona Universal Pectin. It's a pectin, but it's a little different than the regular pectin that you buy, because, let me see if I have one that's open. In it you get a package of pectin, but you also get a package of calcium powder, which this enables you to use this kind of pectin. It enables you to use less sugar, something like half the amount of sugar or honey or whatever sweetener you use in your jam that is normally required in a regular recipe that just uses normal pectin, like we use Certo or whatever you get, that kind of a pectin. It's not a low sugar jam because you still use sugar, but you'd use like half the amount. And I've used it before for other jams, but I have never used it for pepper jelly. So I'm going to try a pepper jelly and see how that works. So we're going to be doing that. And then, of course, I have, like I said, I have some of these chilies. I have to roast the chilies for the salsa, and I want fresh chilies for the salsa roja. Fresh chilies for both of these recipes. So but I have some dried of each kind, and what am I going to do with the dried? Some that are pretty well dried, some are just on the way to dry, which would be fine, but some of them are pretty well dried on that bush. Hard dry. What do I do with those? One of the things we use very often in our kitchen is something called crushed red pepper. And here I happen to have a jar of crushed red pepper, but I refill these all the time. It's hard to see because of the labels, but you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about flakes. Can you see that? It's flakes of pieces of chili, and there's usually bits of chili, and even the seeds are in there too. And we put that in, we cook a lot with this. We put it in, pinch that, and just about everything. And if you look on the label, the ingredients, it says, ingredients, organic crushed red pepper, which doesn't tell you a whole lot, does it? But normally, a crushed red pepper flakes is very often a combination of peppers, but mostly it is like a cayenne kind of a pepper, okay, which is pretty hot. Well, we don't grow cayenne peppers. We grow serrano peppers. And if you would look at, I'm just looking down here because I made a note of some things from the Scoville pepper scale, which is the scale that tells you how hot different peppers are, which is very interesting to note. And if you're going to work with peppers at all or eat peppers at all, you need to kind of be familiar with the heat of peppers, because I hear people all the time misspeaking about peppers. They always say, oh, jalapenos are so hot and serranos are milder. That's not true. That is not true. A jalapeno is on the pepper scale between 2,500 and 8,000 on the scale, but a serrano goes up to 23,000. Difference between 8,000 and 23,000 is a big difference, and it only goes down to 6. So while there's a possibility that they could overlap there a little bit on the scale, a serrano is much hotter than a jalapeno. It just, trust me, I've been growing them for years. I lived in Southern California for 40 years, where they're growing everywhere. A jalapeno is not as hot as a serrano. Okay, but anyway, according to my information, that a lot of people use, a lot of times there is just a combination, mostly a hotter pepper. So I would say I would use mostly my serranos for that. It's occasionally I will throw in a hot jalapeno or two, but it just depends on how many I have. But most of the time I just use a serrano. And I keep in mind, if I am using, when I make them, I have another jar of my homemade crushed pepper flakes that is When they're in that jar, they're homemade. When they're in this jar, they are not. So these are going to be a little spicier. So when I go, because I don't measure, I just pinch out how many I need. I know that I pinch out fewer of this and I pinch out more of what I make. Okay, so, and that is just basically drying the pepper, usually cutting the top off if you want to dry it. If you don't have dry ones to start out with, you can take a pepper and you can cut the top off. I would use a serrano for that. Cut the top off, maybe split it open if you want to, but just, put it in either a dehydrator on a low setting or in the oven on the lowest it'll go, and just leave it in there to dry until it will snap. Till it snaps rather than, I don't want to break this because I'm going to get seeds everywhere, but it'll snap rather than bend. See, these are drying, but these will bend. This is not dry yet. Okay, if I did that and it snapped, that's what you want. And then you can put them in the food processor for like a few seconds, but I never do. I crush them by hand or almost chop them by hand because it just makes the consistency. You want a consistency of this flakiness and the seeds. Okay, so anyway, that's something to do with those. I also could do a chili powder. This is an interesting thing. The chili powder, and I'm talking chili powder, chili, C-H-I-L-I powder, not C-H-E-L-I-L-E, chile. There's often confusion between chili with an I, chile with an E at the end. What is the difference? When do you use what? I'm just bringing this up because when I'm going to be talking to you about chili powder, C-H-I-L-I powder. It's not, if it were chile powder, it would be just of chile, ground up chilies, hot peppers. That is the Spanish word, chile. And it's only the peppers ground up, nothing else. But a chili powder that you buy from the store for a seasoning that you would maybe put in chili or put in other kind of dishes. If you look on the ingredients, it says the ingredients are organic ground chilies, organic paprika, salt, organic spices, organic garlic. And if you look it up in a recipe, let me see. You will see recipes for it that contain things like oregano, cumin, garlic powder, onion powder, cayenne pepper, with additionally, added to the ground chile, C-H-I-L-E powder. So you can take your ground serranos or your ground jalapenos, grind them up, and then combine them with paprika and onion powder and cumin, whatever is in your recipe, garlic powder, and make your own chili powder flavoring. And that's what I'm going to do with some of the rest of my dried. Okay, so I'm going to get everything laid out to start one of my recipes. I think I'm going to get the vegetables in the oven ready to roast for my salsa roja, and then I will show that to you and in a few minutes. I'll be back. Okay, I have a big cookie sheet prepared, oiled a little bit. My romas are cut in half. My onions are chopped up. The serrano chilies, I have the tops off, that's all. And I have a little foil packet here of full of garlic with a little bit of olive oil. So a little drizzle of olive oil, a little salt and pepper, and I'm going to put that in a 375 oven and roast that until they get soft. The onions are going to get a little translucent. Tomatoes should soften, and the chili should have a little bit of color on them, just a little bit. Okay, we'll see. Betty White and I are sitting here disgruntled because I was just trying to edit my video and I see that I had a camera malfunction. I believe my battery died or something happened, which I had recorded initially an apology for that and re-recorded something which I was trying to edit into this video when I realized that didn't record either. So maybe this isn't recording either. Maybe I'm talking to myself. I don't know. I'm going to take a chance. I want to tell you what I did with the salsa roja. I roasted the tomatoes. I know I showed you my vegetables. I know that's there. I can see that on my screen. I have the Roma tomatoes. I have the yellow onions. I have the serranos and the garlic cloves. I roasted those until the onions are nice and soft. The translucent, really, the tomatoes are soft. The chilies had a little bit of a color on them. The garlic I did in the foil, and it was nice and soft and smelled heavenly. Okay, so I took that out and I allowed that to cool a little bit. And then I put it in my, I processed it just a little bit. I didn't, not a lot, but I didn't puree it like I did the soup. I left it chunky, but very small chunks, like you would get in the restaurant, in a tabletop, in a table salsa. So anyway, when I processed it, I added some salt, I added some cilantro, fresh cilantro, and then I stirred in a little bit of lime juice, I actually put it, this time I put it into the jar, a little bit, like a teaspoon of lime juice in the bottom of each jar as I was canning it. Okay. And then I put that in my water bath canner, and I had it in half pints, and you'll see the half pints at the end of this video, I believe. I don't know. And for 15 minutes. And the instructions from the safe practices canning sites all say whether you use a half pint, which I did, or a full pint, 15 minutes is a good processing time. Quarts, you would want to do at least 20. And keep in mind the processing times that I'm giving you are for up to altitude of about 1,000 feet. And I'm at sea level, so you have to increase the time. So if you have any questions and you live at another altitude, just look, there's lots of information provided to you on the internet or from the bulk canning site, bulk canning, or I don't know, the FDA, I don't know who, there's somebody that's going to tell you. It's okay. So anyway, I'll show you the finished product at the end, and I apologize. Okay, I'm going to be mixing up my pepper jelly now. Pepper jelly, using something that's called Pomona's Universal Pectin. And I really like this product because I can make a really nice jam or jelly with just about half the sugar, sometimes half the sugar as it would take in a regular recipe. It uses something called a calcium powder to thicken, and when you buy it, here's your instructions, and then you get 2 envelopes in a box, and one envelope would be your pectin. The bigger one is the pectin, and then there's another small envelope which contains something called calcium powder, and there it says calcium. I don't know if you can see it on there. And what you do is you take, the first step that you do it is that you take your calcium powder and you're going to mix it with water. In a jar, something in a jar. And you take like a half cup of water. In this case, I have a half cup of water here. I'm going to put in my jar. And then I'm going to take my calcium powder. And I only need half a teaspoon of it. So I'm going to open this package, measure out. I have 1/2 teaspoon measure here. And I'm not sure how much is in here, but I do know that it's not equal. You don't use a whole lot of the calcium powder in your recipe. So you end up having See, I still have some left in the packet. And then, which I will mix up later, because this, we shake this and we store it in the refrigerator. And it will stay in the refrigerator. My lid's not real tight. It'll stay in the refrigerator, oh, for months actually, and not go bad. So you can use it at any time, because you can see we're only going to use a small amount in this recipe. So you end up having leftover calcium powder. I mean, you have enough pectin to make you have enough pectin to make a couple recipes of jelly, but you have pectin to make, I mean, the calcium powder to make a whole lot of recipes. So, anyway, we'll talk about that a little later maybe. Okay, to make my pepper jelly, this is a really nice recipe because it's a good way to use peppers, because you can use a combination of whatever peppers you have. You can use sweet peppers and bell peppers, and or hot peppers, really spicy, not so spicy. And here I have already processed my peppers in here because I wanted to measure out. I cut them pretty finely in my food processor. But what I have basically here is I had one large green bell pepper, one large red bell pepper, and then I filled that up. I chopped those finely. And then I filled it up with, I had really ripe, beautiful ripe red jalapenos from the garden. So I got that, and I ended up with like two and 2/3 cups peppers. So I'm just going to dump here in my pot. And with these peppers, I'm going to cook them down a little bit, soften them a little bit with 2 2/3 cup of apple cider vinegar. And I could just use the same measuring cup. I'm using Bragg's. It has the mother in it, the organic Bragg's, which I like a lot. But you don't have to. You can use any kind of apple cider vinegar. And I'm going to measure out 2 2/3 cups of this. And, look at that. I had exactly that amount. That's fine. So I'm going to add that to my peppers in my saucepan, and I'm just going to bring this to a boil, and then I'll cover it and simmer it for about 5 minutes. Okay. While I'm doing that, you can maybe see, I guess you can't, I've got my canner beside, and I'm going to, I'm bringing my water up to temp there. Okay, so here I have my calcium powder, dissolving in my warm water, and peppers and apple cider vinegar on the stove. Now I'm going to take, and I have 2 bowls of sugar here divided. Here I have 4 cups of sugar in this bowl, and I have 2/3 cups of sugar in that bowl. And this is the bowl I want first with the 2/3 cup. And I'm going to take the pectin, and I have some pectin left over, and I'm going to measure out 3 teaspoons of pectin. This is from another batch, and mix that in with my sugar. So there's 1, 2, 3 tablespoons. And I'm just going to mix that. Make sure I don't have any lumps in the sugar. And just make sure I have the pectin distributed well through my sugar. Okay. Now when this comes to a boil, and cook it, then we're going to add in some of our mixture here of our calcium powder. And that comes to a boil. So I'm going to I'll come back in a few minutes when this happens. Okay, my vinegar, apple cider vinegar and pepper mixture has been cooking now for 5 minutes. Oh my, it smells fantastic. Even though I'm going to be a little bit overcome by the vinegar peppers. But just turn it down a little bit. Now I'm going to take, the next thing I'm going to do is take some of my calcium water that I have mixed up. And I need 4 teaspoons put into this. So of this whole half cup, I'm only using 4 teaspoons. So I'm going to go. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that's what's going to enable this small amount of sugar to work. Okay, so I'm going to just stir that in, let that cook for just a few minutes. And then, if you recall, I took just 2/3 cup of sugar and added my pectin to that amount, to that sugar. Combine that really well, and that's going to go in next. As I get this, make sure the calcium water is incorporated real well, keeping it cooking, keeping it like a slow boil. And I'm going to add this into my pot. Stir that well. And I'm going to allow this to boil again for several minutes. And while I do, I'll just remind you that this is a combination of red bell pepper, green bell pepper, and then very ripe red jalapenos that were left in my garden. And all told, I have 2 2/3 cup of peppers and 2 2/3 cup of apple cider vinegar initially in this pan. Now, I still use, even though I'm using this Pomona pectin now, I'll get it out and show you again, the box. I still use regular pectin, but I'm finding more and more that this works really well. I'm also finding more and more some of the old-fashioned jams that I make, I don't use pectin at all. I use the natural pectin that's in the fruit, plus maybe a little bit of pectin from like something like chop up a Granny Smith apple, unpeeled. And the natural pectin that's in that apple works really beautifully. I do that for my blackberry jam. I encourage you to make, jelly and jam. If you don't eat a lot of it, it makes wonderful gifts. Plus it's used in a lot of other recipes. You can use jams and even jellies in vinaigrettes or in sauces for cooking other foods. We use jams for, I use jam for coating meatballs at the holiday time. Excuse me, I'm overcome a little bit by this fumes here. But this is really good on a cracker. People like this on a cracker with little cream cheese at holiday time. It looks so pretty with the red and the green peppers in it combination. Okay. So that's been cooking. Just turn it up a little bit more. The sugar has coated, all that sugar that I added has coated. So now I'm ready to add the rest of my sugar. And this is the last ingredient to go in, and this I'm going to put in. And I'm going to want this to cook now I want it to really dissolve well, and I want it to cook. This is the stage where the jelly starts to thicken. So, I'm going to put that in. And I really want to get that stirred in really well. It dissolves rather quickly, but you have to keep stirring it because if you don't, you're going to get clumps. You want to make sure it's all in there. And look at the color. I hope you can see the color. I realize I have a lot of bright light coming in this window. It might be very good, but see, I have clumps of sugar. I really want to get that sugar out of there. Dissolved. And I don't want to splash, because boy, is this hot. I want to caution you, those of you who are working with chilies, hot chilies. Most people use gloves. I don't use gloves because I work with them so often. But you have to be so careful not to touch your eyes, your face, your anything. I was real careful all day yesterday. I had pretty hot. My hands kind of burned yesterday, so I knew I had them on my skin. Because I pulled out some of the seeds. I didn't take all the seeds, but I took all the seeds and membranes out of the bell pepper, of course. Out of the jalapenos, most of the seeds, some of the membrane. But I leave some. I like it, just makes it a little hotter, and I like it hot. That's totally preference. And again, you can use any combination of peppers that you want. Now, right now, I'm looking for clumps of sugar that has not been dissolved. A little hard to see. I think I've got it. People ask me all the time if I stir docile clockwise or do I stir Widdershins? Because a lot of people believe that if you still stir Widdershins or counterclockwise, you reduce, you take away. Clockwise, you add to your spell if you're casting a spell with your food, using your food. You know what? I want to stir it properly. I want to stir thoroughly. When I'm stirring, I want it to stir well. That's much more important to me than what direction I'm stirring. I think it's good to shake up your stirring. One direction, the other, around, and then back and forth. And make sure I'm getting the sides, make sure I'm getting the bottom. You know, that's much more important than any other. Okay, so I'm going to continue to stir, and I want this to come back up kind of to the boil. And remember, when I added that sugar, it lowered the temperature. So it's going to take a few minutes for it to come back up to temperature. And then I'm going to watch for it to thicken. I start to feel it a little bit thicker already, but I want it to thicken more. But keep in mind that it will thicken as it cools. It's going to be, when it's warm, it's going to be runny. If you ever heat up jam for sauces or jelly for sauces, you know what I mean. It sort of makes it runny. But once it cools off, once you've put it in the refrigerator particularly, it's very good and thick. So you don't want it overly thick. But we do want it to thicken. So I'm going to I'll shut the camera off for a minute here so I can just keep stirring this. This is not very exciting TV. And then I'll bring you back when I'm going to fill the jars. Okay, my mixture has been boiling for 5 minutes. And I'm just going to take it now and show you. It's still really thin. It's rather thin. Maybe I can show you dropping it off the spoon. But see, they dropped, rather than run off, it's, see, it's trying to go together into globs. You can watch over in the, see how it's trying to go. Like the two globs on the end are trying to go together and form one glob. That's all I can say. That's when I know that it's done. Okay, so now I'm getting ready to put it in my jars. And I have hot jars. They're hot, they're clean. They're not sterilized. I don't sterilize my jars anymore. It's not necessary. But this is not a canning video, so don't quote me on canning procedure. But again, I'm going to use my, and I don't know how many jars I need. I just have extra ones just in case, but I know I'm going to use that many, so let me get my ladle and my funnel. And I'm just going to ladle, and I'm going to go to a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch headspace, which is just about to the very top. Don't need a lot. And I realize I'm going to get comments, people say, oh, we never can our jars. We just put them on the shelf and we flip them upside down. I realize there's a lot of people that do that, and that's fine. But I'm giving some of mine as gifts. So I want to be sure they're shelf stable, and I'm not exactly sure how they'll be stored. So I'm just going to do my best to make sure they're really shelf stable. And so I really go clear up to the bottom edge of my funnel. That's how I can tell that I'm within 1/4 inch. And this is really gelling coming out of my funnel. So this is going to be nice and thick. Oh, it's going to be beautiful. It's like ruby red. Let's see. Just want to make sure I get the... And just like I did the other day, this last time, I showed you we're going to wipe the rims real good. Make sure there's nothing on the rim that's going to interfere with the seal. These are hot jars. So I'm going to use a towel. You hold it. Get that nice and finger tight, and then they're going to go into my water bath canner. I'm going to continue to fill these jars and put them in my canner. Whoops. And I'm going to move the camera out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. And then I will be back. When the canner, it's going to process for 10 minutes. I'll bring it back to boil. It'll process for 10 minutes, and then we'll take out the jars. Okay, my canner has stopped. I'm going to pull these out. My jams out. Try to get them here on this towel to cool. It's important when you're pulling hot jars out of hot water, you do not set them on a cold counter, because that'll blow the lid off the bottom off your lids faster than anything. Oh, and you can hear that's one's already starting to pop. They're going to pop kind of fast. So I have, let's see here. This is 5. I've got 6 half pints. These are half pints. 6 half pints and a bit. This is just a little bit that was left over. It's like a half of a pint that didn't fit in a jar, but we're going to put that in the refrigerator. We'll eat that first. And good on a cheese sandwich. That's a real good use for it too. Okay, and we're going to let these cool. And of course here I have my, I have 7 half pints here, plus one more I have that we're probably going to have for dinner tonight of the salsa roja. Okay, I'm going to turn the camera and then say goodbye. Well, that pretty much takes care of my chilies for this year, for 2021. I have behind me, reminding you, we did salsa roja, which is a red restaurant style salsa, pretty spicy. I did that. I have also some pepper jelly, which is going to make some lovely gifts for somebody, or also some lovely things to take, you know, when you know, holiday potlucks, you always have to take something. It's a wonderful thing. You put a block of cream cheese and put some of that jelly on top, or just serve it with a cheese platter. and crackers or toast, little toast. It's really good. It's really good for those kind of things. I like it just on a saltine cracker. I like it with that salt, some kind of salt and crispiness with it. But of course, it's good on, like I said, a sandwich. It's good on some people eat it on a burger. It's a little sweet for me on a burger, but it's nice and spicy. Combination of bell peppers and jalapenos, and of course the apple cider vinegar. I'm drying some things. I did a little bit of smoking some of my jalapenos. When they're smoked, they're going to be stored in jars, and then they can later be converted into chipotle with adobo. I'm going to do that someday. And I also am going to just be drying the the rest of the serrano chilies to make for either for red pepper flakes or maybe a chili powder, which maybe if I make a chili powder sometime, I'll share that recipe with you here, what I'm going to do. I don't need any right now. I still have both the chili flakes and the chili powder, so I'm just going to keep them in jars. You've seen those before, those jars that I just keep them, and when they're really good and dry, and I might speed them up a little bit in the oven or speed them up a little bit in the dehydrator. But they dry, to be honest, in my climate, they dry really fast, just sitting out in bowls or whatever, or on plates. But when they're good and good, really, really dry, I'm positive they're dry, then I can put them in my jars, just to store them in jars, just in the cupboard, for when I need them in the future. So there you are. I'm just working my way, finishing up my harvest, and slowly walking into Yule. Thank you so much for watching on this Motley Monday. As always, I am Rebecca, the good wife, and I wish you blessings.